Thank you. I know it's been a long couple of days, so thanks for joining us at the innovation discussion around IoT. So we're very lucky today because we've got two great innovators up on stage here. One thing real quick before I introduce them, can you put the Pigeonhole link up here? So if you want to ask questions, you can use Pigeonhole. To be honest, it's a small audience. Just feel free to raise your hands or throw something at me or yell, and we can make this a more interesting discussion. Also, feel free, unless you're planning on taking a nap, you can move forward a little bit more. There's not that many people, so we can make it a little bit more of a cozy environment. But on that, if you want to use Pigeonhole, they'll put the link up on the screen there, so you can just type in your question. It's near the end of the event. If you want to have fun with it, try and insult us, catch us off guard. You know, let's make this interesting. But now what I'll do is I'll like to ask Eugene and Bernard to please introduce yourselves, a little bit about your backgrounds. I know you both have extensive experience in this space, so let's try to keep it to 30 minutes each.
That's perfect, all right when I'm about to leave. So just 30 seconds. I run a healthcare vertical for a global consulting company, SoftServe. We do technology consulting. But my other hat, I've been around healthcare innovation for about 8 to 10 years now. I started with a Health 2.0 New York City chapter, which was bringing together clinicians, entrepreneurs, venture capital, doing the same thing in Amsterdam now. We're about 1,000 members in Amsterdam. I had my own healthcare startup back in the day that we ended up selling, and then got the entrepreneur bug. So I absolutely love a lot of the innovation, and healthcare certainly needs disruption. So that's my 30 minutes.
Okay, 30 minutes.
Thing is not working. You gotta press the button. I tried to press.
This happened yesterday. Eugene actually saves us. He's the only one who's figured out how to turn on the mics.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Innovation.
Yes. Hi, my name is Bernard. I'm currently the head of digital services from Singapore Post. As all of you know, Singapore Post is a public listed postal company. We are focused on becoming the regional leader in e-commerce logistics, and we are, of course, invested by Alibaba, and one of our major investors is Singtel. So my portfolio in SingPost is all things digital, all things consumer facing, everything except e-commerce. So we'll be like logistics, financial services, retail services, and additional to my portfolio is social media, Internet of Things, and innovation strategy. So one of my claim to fame is the recent drone delivery that we have done with Pulau Ubin last year. So that's probably, but I think we do a lot more. We did the Pop Station Parcel Locker, which is one of the few successful implementation of Internet of Things that nobody talks about. So on my other little hat, I run a little podcast called Analyze.Asia, ANALYSE.Asia. I interview everybody, the top leaders in Asia every week, and it's focused on that, and partially that was why I was here, right? I think that's also less than 30 minutes.
He basically doesn't sleep. I think he's the busiest person I've ever met in tech, so, but he keeps himself busy with this as well.
And there's our third guest.
And this is, talk about perfect timing. Abhi from McKinsey, welcome on stage. What I'm saying is just a brief introduction into your background, and then we'll get into the whole discussion. So you didn't miss much.
Sure, good. Hi, I'm Abhi from McKinsey. I'm an associate partner and work with mostly technology firms. And IoT is a topic that I'm deeply associated with, working for some of the largest technology companies, telcos, as well as some smaller startups that we have started working with. So, literally been running to reach here. So, happy to be here.
Okay, very good. So we got a couple questions up on Pigeonhole. And a couple people like this one, which is, what advice would you give to people looking to drive IoT innovation in their organizations or industry? So, any thoughts on that? Do you want to?
I'll do a very quick one. And obviously depends on the industry, but I think as I mentor a lot of startups, and whether you're an entrepreneur or intrapreneur in a large organization, picking, not necessarily low-hanging fruit, but really a focus. So if you're trying to solve, preventing falls in a hospital, and can you use some kind of a device or some kind of innovation around it? But I think focus is key, because while the big picture and the big ROI is important, especially in a large company, the proof points are key. So that's a very short answer.
I just have a very simple advice is don't try to solve a 2 cents problem with a 1.99 solution. So that's basically one of the big problems that usually you see everybody who's trying to drive IoT innovation within their companies. But speaking on that, my view of thinking about IoT is the following. So whenever in the organization we start having this conversation, let's put Internet of Things, let's put sensors, let's put something to drive innovation. My first 2 questions to them is the following. What is the business objective that this Internet of Things technology is driving? That means what kind of business transactions is it driving? The second question would be, what are the data that is going to be facilitated through this Internet of Things? That means what kind of useful data and insights that we could think of that. And once you pass these 2 tests, then we can talk about whether we should implement this basically.
Yeah, so I think before we get to IoT itself, I think the larger question is innovation itself is a very big problem for many companies, right? And the 2 problems that we have seen a lot is people try to do, let's say these days, digital strategies in fashion. So every company says we have a digital strategy or we have an innovation strategy. Now the challenge is that you don't need a digital strategy. You need your strategy to include innovation, to include digital. A company cannot have a strategy and a digital strategy. And that's a big problem that many people make, that they start toy factories, a digital lab, an innovation lab, and do not allocate resources to it. They say 99% revenues coming from this, so our best and most capable people would be on this, the core, and not really the new part. I think that has been the biggest problem, that while there is a lot of speak about innovation, people don't really put wood behind the arrow.
I think we see this a lot with some of the companies out there today when they look at things just around even like mobility, for enterprise mobility inside the enterprise. They end up putting it out as a side project. Someone runs it. They have a strategy that actually doesn't support the IT strategy, that doesn't support the business strategy. So you end up with these siloed organizations and strategies, and it makes the organization quite ineffective, I think. So
I sort of wanted to add on this. So one of the interesting things that actually happened to SingPost, which a lot of people know that we had a pretty interesting transformation story, and why did we manage to do that? And we have a very successful digital transformation. So there are 3 ingredients. And usually when people start approaching me and say, hey, would you be interested to be head of digital? I'll tell them, do you have the few things? First of all is, does the senior management embrace digital as part of their strategy? As in just now, I think you made a very good point that it's not about just the digital strategy and the strategy of the company. The strategy of the company should include digital. The second piece, which is pretty important, is that the digital leader must be driving the business unit. That means he or she must own a P&L. And once they own the P&L, the way they think about is, even if it's a core business with no digital in it, they'll start to put in the digital mindset to create the leverage of cost savings and how to make it much more interesting with digital assets. And the third piece is that innovation should not be a lab that's being parked in some corner office and nobody cares. So one of the things that we SingPost do is that in every business unit, we have to innovate by ourselves. So we can see that in logistics, we have pop stations. In mail, we have digital mailboxes. In the retail side, we actually revamped the SAM platform into a multi-kiosk, multi-omni-channel platform. In each of these businesses, we actually think digital. So there is no such thing as the digital unit driving that. It's the digital unit collaborating with the traditional business units think about that. And I think this ingredient is very important to a lot of companies who are thinking about digital transformation.
I want to come back to one point you mentioned, and we started talking about these digital leaders, or having the C-levels actually try to drive innovation in the organization. And that's great on the surface, but in reality, what we know when we go out there, it doesn't happen all the time. So what about that? What about in that situation? What should people think about doing where, yeah, you know you need to innovate in your organization, but you're not going to get that support? Do you go out there and try and be the lone wolf, or do you just try to find other ways to convince them of it?
You leave.
You leave, okay, yes. Excellent. Okay, so we just made everyone unemployed. Okay.
No. I think it's not that. I think it's also. I think the most important for digital leaders who are actually going into a very traditional business with a very traditional core mindset is that they need to look at small wins. What I mean by small wins is there a very. You should not go in and say, I have the digital technology to solve your problem, because I think every problem is different. The first thing you should be asking is, can you tell me what your problems are? I think that's the mindset I walked into SingPost, and I asked my friends in logistics, and they say, oh, we had this very simple problem of trying to get couriers to do delivery and try to do sign-off. And then we started thinking about it. Can we build a solution that is so easy that we ourselves can use? I just need to tell you a little bit of secret about SingPost is that a lot of us from the C level all the way down to the senior management level, senior managers level, we actually go and be couriers during the peak period. We drive our cars around, and we created this little Android solution that's actually scalable across different markets that actually allows us to scan stuff, pick up stuff, have a Google Maps, and even get our clients to sign. And the reason why we do this is because we ourselves have to understand exactly how the front line works. Once we understand their problems, then we build solutions that truly solve their problems. And once that happens, then people will have the buy-ins. Because you cannot just go in and think that the digital will solve the problem. Sometimes actually the digital solution is actually creating another $5 more. It doesn't give you cost saving, it increases your cost savings. Then what's there to save, right? So that's how you should think about that.
I'm always fascinated you got away with that, because most organizations, if you tried to go into the senior management and say, you're going to go do this job for a day, they would just probably kick you out of the office or fire you on the spot. So, but Abby, like McKinsey's been going through a lot of transformation recently and driving innovation in the way that you communicate with your customers and also helping them with the new labs you're setting up here. So can you give us an idea about how you're approaching that and how McKinsey's changed the way it innovates and helps customers innovate?
Yeah, so first of all, McKinsey itself, right? Now, McKinsey, many of you might just think is the old strategy consulting firm with just do a strategy. And I think what we have been doing is we realized with this digital, etc., we ourselves needed to change, and we were ourselves at risk. We see consulting moving into something called asset-based consulting versus just people-based consulting. So we've done a couple of things, right? So one thing we launched is something called McKinsey Solutions. So today, McKinsey has around 30 plus software assets that when we realized that there was some analytics that our BAs, our analysts were repeating for every customer, let's say on pricing, we just made it algorithmic and made a solution out of it. So now clients can literally work with just software from McKinsey, not just people, which was the traditional model. Then we have been helping clients to move to digital for years. But first you were trying to tell them that you need to adopt digital. And then they said, okay, now I need to work with an SI. They launched an RFP. They got RFP response. And then it took 2 years before anything took off the shelf. So a lot of feedback that we got was that you can't just tell me to do this. You have to help me do this. I think that has led to us launching McKinsey Digital, which actually has 1,000 plus agile developers on McKinsey's roles. So that today when we say, you need to adopt digital, let's say, or a bank, you need to change your account opening process. In 4 hours to 24 hours, we can turn around a working prototype of an app by McKinsey so that we can demonstrate that it is possible. So by doing hackathons, by trying to create app prototypes, and if clients need it, we even integrate with the backend. And first solution, then you start launching it. So I think that has been a bit of a journey that McKinsey itself is doing. We are setting up an operations lighthouse with EDB in Singapore, which would demonstrate the use of IoT and other manufacturing-oriented technologies for people to see and experience before they can try. So that's also something we are doing, and I think EDB has been very supportive for that.
All right, very good. So the next question, before I read it out, I'll give you guys a hint. I want you to talk about healthcare, Eugene. Bernard, you're going to go drones. Abby, you can go after whatever you'd like on this one. So the question is, are there any new technologies or solutions on the horizon that you think we should be looking out for to drive IoT innovation? And who wants to? I'll let Bernard go first because he actually will have his answer. I know what he's going to talk about with the drones, and I'll let you think about it for a minute.
Okay, so drone deliveries is definitely one because I think that's probably one of it. The other interesting thing that's actually ongoing in logistics is actually autonomous vehicles. I think that's probably one of it because one of the most interesting things that's been going on is that, here's my personal belief. The next 5 years, the automotive industry is going to change very drastically as compared to the last 80 years because of self-driving cars. And the reason why self-driving cars is going to be interesting is because it changes the way how we think about mobility. It itself, that means the car is no longer just a car to take you from point A to point B. The car is actually like the phone. You see, if you think about it, right, the smartphone today is not a phone. The smartphone today is a computer. It's actually a device that allows you to do computing. So now take the same analogy that the car is no longer a car that takes you just from point A to point B, but actually it is another computer in a thing. So connected self-driving vehicles is going to be one. And the other thing that's probably interesting is about, I think in IoT, coming back to the topic, is about sensors. Sensors that actually drives intelligent transactions. That means you have your traffic lights that's truly smart. You have logistics fulfillment, the supply chain also have very, very smart devices that allows you not to just automate. I think the next industry age is not about automation, it's about smartness. It's about the capability to be able to perform much more customized workflows that ordinary automation cannot do. So that's where I think things are actually going.
As a quick follow-up on that, though, I know, okay, so if you don't know about the drone delivery they did, it was the first, if I'm correct, commercial drone delivery of a package, and they shipped it from Singapore across the water to Paula Ubin, which sounds pretty simple. But I believe there was a few complications involved. And if this is how difficult it is to send a simple drone, how are we going to adapt to the connected cars? So why don't you explain that?
Okay, I'll tell the story a little bit about, I think everybody know that we did the authenticated drone delivery system. But first of all, let me just give you some context how we thought about it. So before we decided to do this drone delivery, we took a look at what everybody is doing, DHL, Amazon, and all the other our rival postal companies that were doing. One thing we noticed that's very clear for everybody, they're clearly not thinking about, I mean, with the exception maybe Amazon and DHL, they're not thinking about what it really means for the postal delivery world today. So traditionally, everybody know what traditional postal companies do, right? We deliver things from point A to point B. Right? Point B is the recipient. You are the recipient. You have a mailbox. You have a key that authenticates that you are the rightful recipient of that. So in a drone delivery world, what does that mean? It means that if I were to fly a drone from point A to point B, I just can't drop the drone to somewhere and somebody can pick up the payload, right? There's no authentication involved. So when we did this Ubin trial, we were actually designing it for a real problem. So we had this postman who's in his 70s. He goes to Pulau Ubin 3 times a week. We record him twice from retirement, okay? And we are having problems trying to find a successor for him because of manpower challenges. No one wants to walk to Pulau Ubin these days. So we decided that, hey, what if we can do a drone delivery across? But what we do is that we have a way to authenticate with a resident in Ubin that actually could be, they would say, I'm the rightful intended recipient of this. I take the package and I deliver to the rest of the residents. So we test trial that. But what we were not prepared, what we were surprised was, it's actually a very straightforward line of sight path that we did for the Ubin drone flight. Everybody say, well, it's just a straight line path, right? But it turns out that there are some complications. It turns out that the Ubin route is in the heart of 3 aerodomes. 3 aerodomes means 3 airports are flying planes around there. Just to let you know, the 3 airports, one is Seletar Airport, one is Paya Lebar Airport, and Changi Airport. So I just tell you one short little anecdote. One thing that we compromised was that we needed to not charge the drone fully to fly to Ubin and back. We only have 80%. The reason why is that what happens if some hacker gets into your drone and detours it and flies this way? If it's 5 kilometers this way, you will hit Changi Airport, you hit a commercial plane. That's considered an act of terrorism. If it goes the other way, you get into Malaysia's waters, it's constituted as an act of war, right? I mean, but the regulators' concerns are really real, right? Despite we told them that we have actually put in a safety mechanism in the drone that within 100 meters this thing tries to deviate, we will just jam it and shut it down and go straight to the river. They still say, cannot be trusted. You cannot be trusted on this. So what we will do is we will take the fuel down by 80%, and it will never get to Malaysia and it will never get to Changi. So that was how we convinced them, and it's really, really complicated because we need just to make sure that we can fly this little line of sight, we need to get the police force informed, the Air Force informed, the Naval, because the ships passing by, informed as well. And then we also have to promise that, okay, and we were in the midst of a haze last year, so I have to promise below 100 PSI, so we almost couldn't fly it. And then, of course, the part about challenging airworthiness, we have a problem, and this is the part of where we need to educate the regulators, where you have the regulator who's a captain from the Air Force, who is telling a PhD in physics, which is myself, that the way how a drone flies, which is a quadcopter, behaves like a plane. You got a real problem if that engineering knowledge is not there. So these are the kind of hoops we have to jump through. But truth be told, I think the regulators were very open-minded. They did allow us to push them, and we actually learned a lot from just operating with them. So to get that, I think the technology is already here. It's just that the regulatory hoop that we need to jump through is actually very difficult, and it requires a constant engagement. And I think the thing that we actually walked out of is that we wanted to come up with a framework with the regulator so that we can expand the ecosystem, not just for us thinking about drone delivery in the future, but also for the startups and the other companies to flourish within this new ecosystem. And that is what we were thinking. That is why we did this drone delivery.
So I think it's important to realize on this that just because we can do something there, you have to think about what the impact is going to be on this. And I think you learned a lot of lessons, and I don't think you're going to see tons of drones delivering packages anytime soon.
Well, too bad. I actually read something around the drones. So talk about, healthcare, that there's some trials about delivering prescription drugs, emergency kits, and things like that to actually leverage this technology. And of course, the regulations are complex, and I'm glad that you guys are sort of educating the regulators around it. So drone is maybe one piece around bringing it. The other piece that we've been talking about in healthcare, I mean, bodies are complicated and complex, right? And treating those bodies remotely, and of course there's a ton of devices out there today, but remote patient monitoring, while again it's been around, but I think the miniaturization of devices and also the Internet of Humans that I've been kind of talking about is absolutely key to actually combine this in people's home. I just saw an interesting startup, a Dutch startup called Tiny Robots, and it's this cute little thing that actually communicates with the elderly, but also communicates with the caregivers, and it's monitoring and measuring a lot of the environmental data, but also, hey, have you taken your medication today, ma'am, right? And then also at the same time communicates with the caregiver. So I think we'll see a lot of robotics and environmental sensors alongside with the traditional medical devices that are in the homes. I think that's probably one of the more interesting pieces. The last one that I'll mention, we had an earlier conversation. I personally have a NFC chip inserted, but I think we're talking about implantables and insertables as well. Insertables are obviously invasive. And so implantables, but there are innovations that are going around. For example, diabetic patients, can you with a patch monitor the blood glucose levels and actually for type 1 diabetes actually inject insulin with tiny little needles that are not pricking you nonstop. So I think those are the spaces to watch in the healthcare space, and I'll just pass it on.
I think I have a very different point here. I think we many times mistake, I would say, innovation with new technologies. And I think especially in the IoT zone, what we have seen is that for many industries already have a huge network of sensors deployed, but nobody using them. Let's say you think about an oil rig. It typically has thousands of sensors, but is used only for anomaly detection. If something goes wrong, there's an alarm. If something does not go wrong, all the data captured by sensors is purged. And I think the starting that we saw is that before you start solving a sensor network, install sensors, somebody has sensors installed. All you need to do is now use this information to get something meaningful done. And that itself is innovation. Another example that you saw is elevators. I'm sure all of you have been frustrated at lunchtime or in the morning time when an elevator opens and then you can't enter it, right? And now elevators do have sensors which prevent the door from closing. But nobody uses that sensor to figure out how many people have entered or left. Extremely simple to do in the logic level. So that the logic knows whether how many people are there in an elevator and is there enough space or not, so that if there is not, it will not open. So there is already so many sensors installed. We are just not coming up with solutions which can use those capabilities to create value for which somebody would pay money for. And that's a very important point, that while everybody is looking for that cool, the next, what would make headlines, but there's enough value that is waiting to be unlocked.
Can I just add one little thing about little innovations? I met the CEO of a long-term care facility. This was years ago. One of his biggest challenges was that, believe it or not, a lot of the nurses would fall constantly. Didn't know why or what. The innovation was not an Internet of Things device. It was literally little rubber slippers. And the number of falls went down by like half, which is amazing, right? So we don't need to think about it as devices, and to your point, just capturing or little things that can actually make an impact in an environment.
And I think the analytics component of this is important because I know you did a study, McKinsey did a study recently. I looked at our most recent survey information. In most areas, we're analyzing under 20% of the data we capture right now. So like you're talking about with the different sensors, think of a large high-rise. You could have 170 to 200,000 sensors in a single building. But what you end up getting is too much information that's not prioritized or filtered down enough. So what we need to actually start doing is find ways to innovate the data that we're actually capturing and identify actions that we can do on the back of it, I think.
I have an interesting case just to add on, not just about the data piece. So this is a problem that one of my friends, Peter Ho from Hope Technique, was solving for a hospital. So it turns out that there's this little robot that they actually have. It can travel itself and carry medication from the ground level all the way to the up level by itself. And originally, when they implemented it, there was a problem. Every time the robot gets to the lift, it was overloaded. So the poor robot never gets into the lift and doesn't deliver the medication on time. So when they redesigned the hospital, one of the things they thought about it, how do we get this little robot to actually get the medication, the right things across without any interference? So what they decided to do is create a very mini lift that is so small, only the robot could get through. But the humans are not allowed to get through. So they can travel anywhere around Khoo Port Hospital. But what's the moral of the story here is that sometimes the technology can actually solve the problem, but because of certain user experience and human factors, that actually makes it very difficult to be solved. And I think that's also come into the problem of sensors as well, as because you can get a lot of data, but you may not get good data, but also you may get crappy data sometimes.
Okay, so the next question I'm going to go into on Pigeonhole has 5 votes, so it's leading the way right now, so we'll have to cover this one off. The question is, innovation is great, but how should companies balance innovation with meeting business objectives? For example, cost-cutting, near-term revenue focus versus long-term strategy. So Abhi, why don't I start with you on this one?
So I think that's the main point. So for any large company which is a user, the most large companies that we serve, as well as for large providers, I think that's the right way to start. And it goes back to the question that you said that CXOs don't believe in innovation. I think what we have realized, you need to talk in their language. And in general, it's a change management problem because a CEO, a CFO, a COO is somebody that they only know that if cost is a problem, we need to fire people. And they don't see that we can up productivity in some way using technology and it can help. So what we have realized is that in general, it is best not to think about, I think the point that I was alluding earlier, that business value comes actually first. For example, we have seen the oil and gas problem that we talked about in manufacturing, just purely in manufacturing. There's so much hype about IoT in the Fitbits, etc. But in manufacturing, where just with one use case of condition-based maintenance, what we convinced recently a client of ours was as to how if you we got a partner involved which has a device that you put on machines, it measures only 2 things, temperature and vibration. And using that, you can help improve predictive maintenance. And then how you go and convince the CEO and CFO is that when you do this, what would it lead to? So today you do scheduled maintenance, it shuts down the machine every month. If you don't have to do that, you gain 1 day of machine time. Millions of dollars of machine, if the productivity of the asset goes higher. If you don't have to do scheduled maintenance, the maintenance staff requirement goes down. And we could very, very specifically put a number to this value and hence get the project going. That why that startup that has really come up with a solution should be allowed to do a pilot because there's a clear business value in the entire cost-cutting part, right? And I think a lot of B2B companies can massively benefit from overall IoT just by gaining operational productivity improvement, and they're realizing it.
Just a couple of points additional. So we think of innovation, or a lot of people think of innovation as it's got to be disruptive, right? And indeed, a lot of things like Uber, right? Disruptive innovation in that market. If you look at different horizons of innovation, there's the horizon 1, 2, and 3. And I think it really depends on what the company and the senior leadership, horizon 1, can you augment your current product set, right, and innovate there? Can you create a different set of products? That's horizon 2. And will your model or business model completely flutter if you don't go for horizon 3, right? And so I think it depends where you are in the company and where you can actually impact that overall organization is where you try to focus. I'll use pharma as an example. If you have a skin cream, can you augment it with a digital technology that will help prevent, melanoma and cancer? That might be a packaged kind of thing versus going, okay, only digital prescriptions tomorrow or in 10 years.
I will tell a little bit of a story on how do you have companies balance innovation and meeting objectives. The way how I'm going to first tell you is start from the end goal in mind and then work backwards down to what is the current state now and then how do you reach it. So the most best use case example for SingPost was the redesign of our post office. So I don't know, have you all seen some of our new post office? So when we first started doing it to redesign the post office, it wasn't just the digital team was part of it. There was also the operations team and also the logistics team. So what we did is that we said, hey, but we don't have all the things in. We haven't even redesigned the new SAM machines and all that kind of thing into there. But what we decided to do is, why don't we set up the environment such that we first solve the cluttering problem, the operations problem first, and then set up the post office with the icons that look digital, so that, and to basically get the user to know what they want to do in the post office. Subsequently, we bring in the digital assets that actually allow them to know, oh, I want to pay, so I can press this button with this icon. And then we extend the platform out to mobile and website, which is what we have already done with the SAM today. So how have we done that? We have done a few things. We have done first, we try to balance the near-term objectives, is to try to do cost savings. Second, then we say, okay, once we get the cost savings, then we get to the near-term objectives. We need to refresh our SAM machines, not just for the kiosk, but we need to turn the kiosk into an omni-channel platform. That means our customers should be able to access our services 24/7. And then what is the full form objective of the problem is that we want to innovate. Our view of the post office is that today we have 58 post offices, 300 SAM, but our dream is to have 5 million post offices. And then you must be asking me, Bernard, how do I get 5 million post offices? I say, your smartphone. The ideal world for us is that at some point, all post office services should be available on your smartphone, on your tablet. Correct? Then you should be able to access without the need of going to that service. So if you design with the end goal in mind and you move backwards to the near term, then you start to say, okay, there is this thing. Can you put all the things in place such that by the time you reach this stage, can you just turn on the innovation and start to move? In fact, we put in a lot of NFC stuff, but I can't say much until you've seen it.
Okay, we need to take a quick second here to thank Eugene, because he has to leave. I was going to make a smart-ass comment about how we voted you off the panel, but I won't do that. But he does have a flight to catch, and unfortunately the drones aren't prepared to take him there.
Yes, I apologize, but if you guys are on Twitter, Health Eugene, ask me anytime.
It's Health Eugene on Twitter.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so thanks.
Hey, catch up with you, Eugene. Take care.
Okay, 5 minutes more, we kick the next one off. And then
Yep.
there's a question in the audience, but I don't think there's a microphone there, so I'll just run out real quick. Is it? Well, I'll race you. Yeah. Okay.
I work in digital advertising, bigger advertising corporation agency, and we've been, because it's digital, we've been internet for a decade and a half sort of thing, and we've been looking at waiting for the rest of the world to become digital, and to some extent we see Internet of Things as being, wow, great, bricks and mortars catching up, and that there's been a gap between us, or there's been an inability to, in the sales process, to match it up, for example. And we're looking at Internet of Things when we first saw it at consumer conferences, drones, telephones, televisions, automated cars and things like this. And we're seeing from a consumer point of view, well, where do you put an advert on it? And obviously that's the wrong way to look at it, sort of thing. And obviously when we're looking at our brands, we can see that in the future, for the advertising agency, the people like General Motors or whoever we're working for, we can see that they have to have a continuous connection with the consumer, rather than sold you a car, goodbye, rather than you booked a hotel, goodbye, sort of process. And even though it's digital, we've always, we're connected, but we've not always had our data silos connected. different platforms, clients want a bit of this, a bit of that sort of thing. And that's why we talk about platforms more now, because we're trying to, and obviously big data, and it's all in there, the cliches. But we're also looking at, with the Internet of Things, is the industrial or 4.1 or whatever, 4.0, whatever we're calling it. And I would, because but that, again, is that simply oil rig workers no longer being greasy guys who wrestle with things, but are now people who sit in control centres who've got PhDs and are analysing all the stuff that's coming in. And there's certainly an element of that. But sorry, I'm going on a bit. This is where I'm throwing at you. It's the change of attitude in the workplace that is needed that will come in the future, and maybe Mackenzie's a very best for this one, or maybe the post office as well, is that a lot of our workplace activities are often based on low skills. There may be industry-specific skills, but there's often little more than coordination. Our people work in digital, they send emails to each other. That is not really bringing about an added value into the chain system, which I'm thinking that internet or connected devices, connected data, should be offering. What do you see is the way in which, obviously there's an element of get rid of stupid, automate stupid, use intelligent, why we shouldn't be scared of the robot and all this sort of thing. But what is it you see is that we should be looking for where we structure our skill sets, our capabilities and capacities in a workplace that allows us to take advantage of what is going to be probably the most dynamic value-added chain system since the birth of the internet itself?
It is a very interesting question. So I'm going to answer your three questions in three different pieces, and then I'll try to chain it together. So I think the question is actually about technology displacing labor. I think this is probably what it is, and given today we have artificial intelligence because of the massive amount of data sets as well, and a lot of smart automation. In the US, there are actually now, you don't need junior lawyers anymore. In fact, there's software that can actually vet through contracts and actually basically construct the contract to what you exactly need as well. So what happens to human labor as that? So the first part of the answer is that I'm trying to figure out what my little 3-year-old daughter would be relevant in 10 years' time. And usually when it comes to my mind is that there are a few things. One is that she needs to know how to be able to get software into hardware. I think the days of pure software, pure hardware is over. The thing that we need to think about in order to be relevant for the future is to be able to be digitally educated that we can actually get robots to do things for us. So I think that's the first part. The second part of it is that a lot of the skills in the workplace, I think if we were to look at the traditional workplace today, it's actually designed about maybe the concept of the cubicle. I don't know whether anyone have read this little, very interesting book. Recently I read this book about the history of workplace. I forgot the title, it's called Cubed. The cubicle was designed sometime when it was the industrial automated age at the 1950s to the 1960s. But the cube model that allows the person to work from, must always be reporting to work, giving key cards, and show up and see your boss as well. In the modern time today, a lot of us can actually, I can communicate with Charles over WhatsApp, we can talk to, with a McKinsey consultant via Skype and etc. So the change of the workplace also means that the way we adapt technologies are different. And I think that one of the problems we have is that in the industrial age, a lot of the tasks is actually manually repeatable or automated repeatable, right? Like for example, if you were to ask you to read a contract, you will probably say, if you are highly intelligent and you are good at a professional, you should be able to see what are the implications of that and then come up with the way to solve it, which comes to my last point then. Then the question becomes, I don't think lawyers will be totally gone. So that's my answer, okay? Even though you have machine learning that can learn it, because what I think will happen is that the human brain will actually move upstream. We will move upstream because we will be solving much more complicated problems than that. I know you all saw the recent AlphaGo thing where Google Computer AI beat Go Master, right? And in the fourth round, the the grandmaster actually won the game. Why? Because he tried something that has never been tried before, and it got the computer into the wrong algorithm, and it lost the game. I think that instead of trying to think of why he lost the first 3 games because he was beaten by an AI, I think you should be thinking of the AI actually beat him, yes, because they collected the data of all the how grandmasters play, but he came back in the 4th move and figured out how to beat the computer. And so in that sense, I think that even though technology displaces labor, it will never fully displace specialized skills, because I think you still need humans to drive that.
Yeah, so I think there is a, so McKinsey belief, I think we have done research on that, is around 40% of knowledge jobs can actually get automated, which is a very, very big number. Now, that leads to 2 major complications. Now, it's not that things have not been getting automated for multiple years. It has been happening. But it has been happening at a very organic, slow pace. Now, what we need to worry about it is, would it happen in a very disruptive way? Because when it happens in an organic way, the world adapts to it. If you really think about it, there was a time when in an agricultural economy, we used to work 7 days a week on farms. Now, then people used to work on 6 days a week, then 5 days a week. That's, by the way, one way to absorb productivity release. I'm sure some years later, we'll be working only 4 days a week, 3 days a week, simply because you don't want that much unemployment. Because if you really allow people to work 5 days a week or 6 days a week, there would be unemployment. So the big problem, one problem that we get to because of that would be, if it happens in a very disruptive way, then it can lead to massive unemployment. If like one day a technology changes, which can be at scale deployed, and it is possible because it has happened earlier. That time it was not called digital, that time it was called industrial revolution. When industrial revolution happened, productivity increased by massive amounts, huge unemployment happened, and that is the reason why in Britain, etc., there was so much of unemployment, so much of crime rate increase, and then people were shipped off for small things to Australia, etc., right? Then convict colonies were created for that reason. So it has happened earlier. If something improves productivity massively, it would lead to massive unemployment, can lead to crime, can lead to massive disruptions. That's one problem we need to worry about. A second problem that we need to worry about is that you talked about lawyers. Think about consultants as well. The topmost lawyer and the topmost consultants get paid just massively. Now, what happens is you go through multiple years. You started at the bottom. Consulting firms are fashion over law firms in general. You start at the bottom, and then with practice, you learn and become better. Now, when the junior most jobs can be automated, then the way of learning and capability building vanishes. So that the best lawyer will not become the best lawyer in future because he doesn't have those bottom 5 years of struggle and 5 years of learning, when people really have to work hard, etc. And that's the second problem, that when those simpler tasks, which more junior people do, are eliminated, how would the people who are like this massively, specialized, learn to be specialized? So that's the very second problem that we are trying to see, as to how do we change our capability building models, our training programs to deal with it. I think those are the 2 big challenges that we see within this entire world of automation.
Okay, we have time for probably one more question, but we've got a lot in Pigeonhole, so I should probably go with the one that has the most votes, which is many IoT innovations will fail. So what are the pitfalls that we should look out for? In addition, if you want to throw in something around digital transformation and the skills, we can cover off 2 or 3 other questions right there. So on this one of the pitfalls, I'll give you my opinion first while you guys think about it. So what I see when I go out there is people not understanding enough about it. So they understand that they want to do IoT. They're going out there talking to vendors who are coming in, but the vendors might be on the operational technology side or on the IT side, and they're not bringing a full solution. So I would look out all the time for people who come in and can't bring you that full ecosystem and deliver the full solution to you, and they're just the component part. All these vendors that are out there today should be out there partnering to round out their offering, because it's no point of me having only a sensor if I can't provide you the analytics and I can help you secure the data as well. So always make sure that the vendors that you work with have that capability, and if you're the vendors, just go out and get it.
Yeah, so a couple of pitfalls that we see, right? One is that we just discussed, that in many industry, use of IoT would lead to productivity improvement and hence displacement of labor, and hence there'll be resistance. to just change because it leads to people doing things that they were not doing earlier. So that's organization rejection is one challenge that we see. A second one is, in generally across the stack, do we have capabilities ourselves or the provider we are hiring who can integrate? Because they're just a massively diverse IoT stack, from visualization to analytics to devices to device cloud, etc. So who can bring together a compelling integrated solution? That's also becoming a problem because many people are posturing. Nobody has demonstrated they can really do. Even IT companies, even larger companies, the technology companies have simply not found a way. And then the third problem is the notion about overall security and privacy, which is a very big problem, because when you are sensing so much information, consumers, employees are very worried as to what can this be used for. So if you are in a retail store and somebody is video recording you all the time to see your eye movement to decide placement of an SKU on this shelf versus that shelf, technology exists. But do you have to disclose to every consumer walking into your store that you are being recorded that way, and they may not be cool with it? So that's the privacy problem. And when in IoT, it's not just sensing, and that's a very big limitation that you many times feel, just sensing. There's actuation also. Based on sensing, analytics, you might want to actuate something also in the physical world. And when that can happen, the security problem becomes a problem that if based on gas increasing based on a sensor, a factory can be shut down, then can it be falsely triggered? It would lead to massive value. So I think security and privacy is a very, very big barrier, and you do need innovation to deal with that itself.
The two pitfalls that actually come to my mind, the first one is don't adopt technology for the sake of technology. And this is something I'm very mindful because I'm a technology geek. Every time I walk up to my fellow colleagues who are the business leaders and I say, hey, this is a cool technology, then in my mind I'm also asking myself, does this technology actually solve the business problem? If yes, what does it do? What is the numbers? What's the business case for that? Once you can get past these pieces, then you actually resolve most of the pitfalls. The second bit is actually a little bit, just to amplify the point that security and privacy is also very important. And also change operations process. So when you adopt technology, you're actually changing the process. Sometimes the best way, how we actually overcome this rule in SingPost is that we actually pilot something. We actually test it with a very small group of people. If we were to make this change, how does this technology actually affect the processes? And once we get that processes solved, then we actually get also the change management simpler, because what our staff will say, oh, actually this actually helps us to reduce the problem better. So that kind of mindfulness of trying to get your staff to be part of the process, because this is what everybody say, everybody loves change, but in truth, nobody wants to change. So and change is not painless, basically. So whenever we think about change, so you have to think about that in that perspective.
I've been playing with Pigeonhole, so I wanted to do one thing at the end here, and obviously I'm not good at Pigeonhole. This will be the last one. We don't have much time, so I'll give you the quick answer. The question is, will IoT become the next big thing, or will it be just another passing cloud? I'd love to just say it's a passing cloud. You've just wasted 2 days of your life. But I won't. Of course, certain things will be overhyped, but in reality, a lot of the stuff will deliver a lot of value. And if you've seen a lot of the presentations over the last couple of days, you see that this stuff isn't just smoke and mirrors. It is actually being delivered today. So on that, I would like to thank Abby and Eugene, who left, and Bernard for taking part in this. Hopefully it's been entertaining. If you have any questions, we'll be around for a little bit here. You can come up and ask us that. But thank you very much for your time. And a big round of applause for the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.